So let me start by telling that from the title, you may think that I'm going to have some kind of marketing or PR talk here on how to find new students. That's not at all what we will be talking about. I'll talk about the deeper underlying factors that I consider to be of importance why there is not enough people that choose the profession of education. And I'll talk about us as teacher trainers, because many of the audience I know are in teacher education. But I'll also talk straight to you students to be aware and claim even the powers that you possess. And I hope it will become clear what I'm talking about right now. If you have any questions, you can write them in the chat, and we will, at the end of my talk, dive into some of those. I actually want to claim that, to my understanding, Waldorf education should be able to overcome the shortages and to show a way out of teacher shortages to other schools, to teachers, and even to policymakers. And I'll finish by stating that we as student trainers have to help our students to gain their rightful position at the schools where they are working or will be working. Let me first share my screen, because there is some PowerPoint, and the picture behind me is just a nice picture of Leiden, city of Leiden, but that will not change. So I hope this works. So yes, powerful teachers. I want powerful teachers. We have powerful teachers, but are we aware how powerful we are? So also let me state that I'm well aware that in many of the Waldorf schools, we encounter also serious teacher shortages. So it's not just the fact that you're a Waldorf school, that's not at all a guarantee that you can overcome this problem. And I'll get back to that later. Maybe first a small introduction, because teacher shortage is not a European problem. It's a worldwide problem. There is a recent UNESCO report on teachers, and there you see that the biggest challenges with teacher shortages occur in sub-Saharan Africa, Northern Europe, North America, and Southeast Asia, in that order. Over 120 countries in the world encounter serious teacher shortages. Over 120 countries encounter serious teacher shortages, imagine. And then also be aware that in the low-income countries, the average ratio of one teacher is on 40 children. 40 children on one teacher. Not necessarily in one class, that's the ratio. And in the high-income countries, like most of Western Europe and Northern America, the average is 14 children, 14 children on one teacher. So that also translates into completely different class sizes. For my talk, I will concentrate on the situation in the Netherlands, which I believe can help us understand the situation in many high and middle income countries where we find most of the Waldorf schools. So here you find the most accepted and most talked about reasons behind teacher shortages. It has, of course, many sources, and the reasons may vary from one country to another, but this is what you will hear in many cases. The aging teacher population, poor working conditions, including low salaries, insufficient investment in education, and constant changes in education policy. And all of this actually results in low enrollment in teacher education programs. I'll talk about them. So the first one, the aging teacher population, is a demographic fact. Just in the Netherlands, over the next 10 years, we know that about 25% of all the primary school teachers will retire. In more absolute numbers, we know that we need about 90 new teachers each year, where from our institute, and we're the only Waldorf teacher institute in the country, here graduate 40 to 50 students. So imagine how many teachers come from schools into the Waldorf schools with no Waldorf background, struggling to find their way. And yes, it also results in some real difficulties for many Waldorf schools to find enough teachers in the first place. The second one, poor working conditions, is actually a very interesting topic, and to my understanding, even the most important one. And I'll get back to this one later, as I believe that we can find here some keys to resolve the problem. But let me state for now that I do not believe that low salaries, are a serious cause, at least not in the Netherlands. And I imagine not in many other countries either, actually. In the Netherlands, we had a 20% increase in salaries in just 1 year to get the primary school teachers on the same level as the secondary or upper school teachers. 20% increase in 1 year had no noticeable impact on the number of students or on teacher shortages, not at all. And even since that 20%, already another 10% have been added. So big increases in salary, hardly any more students or people interested to work in education. Later on, it will become clear why. Then the third one, investments in education. I mean, those investments could result, for example, in smaller classes, in higher wages, in better facilities, in more support, for example, for special needs. And I guess those are all issues that any teacher will probably like to have. But in a way, we're also, especially in the Netherlands, we're kind of spoiled with average class sizes of about 24, comparably good salaries, modern, well-maintained school buildings, well-funded support structure. Yes, it's nice to have, but it's really, you really could question how much that will improve the situation. By the way, in the Netherlands, we have about the highest teacher shortage in Europe. Not absolutely, but we're on the top. The fourth one, about constant changing in education policy, I think this is an important one too, because these changes in policy are changes in facilities, and it's very sensitive and disturbing to teachers, especially when it reduces their autonomy and affects their work with the children. Teachers experience that external forces on which they have very little influence. This experience of being subjected to these powers are indeed devastating, and politicians, for example, that are expressing opinions on the quality of the work of teachers and are telling stories of what teachers should or shouldn't do are often based on emotions and what their constituents want to hear, or on economic concerns. And they are diminishing actually the trust in the teaching profession in general. And that not only affects the status of the teacher, but I think more important even is that it affects the trust of parents in the teachers of their own child, resulting in difficult talks in the classroom. So all the above mentioned reasons might be part of why not enough students choose this profession. Another factor is that we should recognize that these shortages are in many economic areas. That there are shortages in many economic areas, in many professions, especially in my country. So students have a high job security in many professions, and therefore they really will make their choice based on what interests them in life. So are we able to show them that the teaching profession is indeed super attractive? And is that honestly true? And if not, they will make other choices. Now, I want to zoom into those poor working conditions. So I imagine here there are three that are of high importance. There are probably more, but those three I think are the most important. And the first one is time constraints. The second, lack of autonomy, and the third one is that there's often no clarity about school policy. And later on it will become clear why those are so important. Teachers face an ever-increasing workload, driven primarily by heightened demands and responsibilities imposed by them, on them, by governments, by parents, by society at large. So the modern educator is tasked not only with imparting knowledge, but also with addressing a myriad of social, emotional, and behavioral issues among children. This mounting pressure can lead to burnout and disillusionment amongst teachers. Now, any true pedagogue wouldn't shy away from many of the challenges of education and be happy to expand their work beyond imparting knowledge. But I see these problems with time, autonomy, and the lack of clear policies. If we talk about time, contract hours, how many hours your contract is that you work for. Is it the 20-hour contract, the 40-hour full-time contract? Those contract hours are based on predetermined calculations of tasks. So there's so much time to be in the class with the children, there's so much time to prepare, there's so much time for meetings, also with parent meetings, etc. And these calculations actually never reflect the reality. They are always too tight. And teachers have accepted this. And I hear this everywhere. This is not a Dutch thing. I hear this in any country where I come. Teachers have accepted this as a fact of teaching life. When new demands like strengthening inclusion or increasing social well-being are put upon teachers, the time constraints tend to worsen. But hey, there's no money and we all find this important, don't we? In order to support our teachers to deal with this constraint, we have actually invested in prepared lesson methods to reduce preparation time and the evaluation time. And we've bought automated systems for the administration to overcome the bureaucratic tasks that have to be performed. But as a result, these systems actually increase the sense of belonging and autonomy that you have as a teacher. They intend to improve the quality of teaching and administration, but they really bite into this other problem, autonomy. Because any qualified teacher will want to get the best out of their students. Here we can discuss and even differ on what is the best. We in Waldorf, I think we have our own ideas about the best. But we always expect certain goals to be reached. And I trust that any qualified teacher has a general good insight in the needs and possibilities of their children in their class. And most teachers will also recognize that these insights might sometimes get distorted over time due to limited benchmarks outside their classroom, due to sympathy or antipathy towards the children and even to their parents, to their own preferences for certain topics and so on. And therefore, many teachers will recognize the importance of independent assessment and calibration with peers, as long as it serves them actually to make their own right choices, not to force them in directions. So over the years, what I see is that teachers have lost control, both over the goals and the evaluations. Under the pressure of governmental bodies, of school management, the managers and sometimes even the caretakers have intruded into the classrooms and into the teaching to such an extent that many of the teachers feel controlled all the time and losing sense of autonomy, where they should feel free to work with the children based on their own professional insights. And then the third one, the lack of clear policies. And I don't know, maybe it's due to the free spirits of all those teachers. Maybe there are other causes. But I do know that in many of the schools, and I see this sometimes, honestly, more in Waldorf schools than in other schools, Many schools struggle to define clear policies and to hold on to them. And let me be clear, it's not just a responsibility of school leadership. As we know, it should be a common effort. And yes, school leadership plays an important role. Unclear policies give uncertainty about what is expected. If all are treated equal and fair, and they often become energy-sucking situations. Now, why are these factors especially troublesome? Joost already told me that I have a background in business administration, so I come with a model from Frederick Hetzberg, the model of the two-factor theory model. And maybe some of you who hold leadership or management positions may know, but I expect that there's also a whole lot of people here who might not know this model. And I think every teacher should know about it. Not from empirical research, but from my own belief, I actually think that this theory can help explain us to an important extent what's behind the teacher shortages. And also gives us some clues of what we can do. I'll go to this. So, Frederick Hetzberg, you can read his quote, says that what makes people happy is what they really do. And what makes them unhappy is the situation in which they are. So he distinguishes two factors, the hygiene factors and the motivators. The hygiene factors are those that, if not in place, if they're not sufficient, you will feel dissatisfied. And if they are satisfactory, you will not feel motivated, but you will not feel dissatisfied. So the best you can get there is that you are not dissatisfied. They hardly motivate. Where the motivators are clear, those topics that really encourage you to work hard and go on and don't stop because you're motivated. I'll show you the model. Let me see if it's still controlling this. Yes. It might be too small for you to read everything. I'll explain. That will do. And maybe you can read it. I'm not sure. So in the lower half, where the red bars are longer, those are the hygiene factors. And the most important one, the biggest red bar, the biggest hygiene factor for that is company policy and administration. If that is not in place, if that's not clear and well agreed upon, and you also feel some ownership there, it is a very big demotivator. You are dissatisfied. Underneath is the supervision and also the relationship with the supervisor. So supervision is not something that motivates you. It actually works the other way around. You get dissatisfied if you get supervised all the time. And then you get to working conditions. Think about your classroom. Is it clean? Is it not too hot? Is it not too cold? But also, do you have enough time to do the work you have to do? If it's not well organized, if it's not there to a satisfactory level, you will feel dissatisfied. If it is in place, look how small the green bar is. It hardly motivates. We find it normal. We expect that working conditions are there. The one that I find interesting is the second lowest one. That's status. So I often hear that status is very important for teachers, and because the teaching profession is not accepted as having high status, that's why people don't choose for it. But actually, from this research, and I know this is a general research over all professions, but nevertheless, status doesn't seem to be that important. And if it is important, it is a dissatisfier and hardly a motivator. So what are the motivators? the most important one, on the top, the big green bar, achievement. So what have you achieved yourself or with the team? What were you able to do to make? That motivates. And we all know it. When we're making art, we're achieving something. And when you get into this, you get into the flow and you don't want to stop and you continue and you're independent. Or you're working together, but it's this achievement. Also, the second one, recognition. So who sees your work as a teacher? Often it's within the classroom and hardly any colleagues see actually how you're working with the children. Maybe the children tell you that they like their class, their lesson, but not the parents, not the principal, maybe sometimes, but is it enough? If it has there, it's a strong motivator. If parents see how you work with the children and can experience it or hear it from the stories of the children and they give you the recognition, strong motivator. The work itself is a motivator. The fact that you can grow within your work is a motivator. But all those motivators, they're actually always there. It's the hygiene factors that are often not well taken care of. So what is actually behind all the causes that I've just mentioned? In my years working in primary schools and now with students, I've come to believe that the root cause of the teacher shortage lies actually in the perception of education as an economic burden rather than a cultural phenomenon. Over the past 50 years, there have been a gradual shift away from education perceived as a cultural factor, and it's more perceived as an economic. It should be economically efficient or competitive, and we need to have quantifiable outcomes. So some of you already understand. I'm talking here about the perspective of the social threefold model. That education has moved away from its traditional roots in the cultural and spiritual spheres and has become increasingly intertwined with the economic and rights-based considerations. And consequently, the true essence of education, which lies in the nurturing, the holistic development of individuals, and fostering a deep appreciation for learning and knowledge in the freedom of the cultural sphere, has been overshadowed by narrow economic objectives and utilitarian rights considerations. And this has caused so many of the hygiene factors not to be on a satisfactory level, while limiting the motivational factors. So it's of utmost importance to reframe the discourse surrounding education and reclaim its rightful place as a cultural and spiritual endeavor, that it needs its freedom to thrive. And yes, indeed, I think it would be of a primary responsibility of policymakers and school leaders to shift the paradigm. But I have little trust that this will happen anytime soon. So by introducing the original insights of the threefold model into our educational curricula, we can empower our students to develop a deeper understanding of the societal forces that play and equip them with the tools to navigate these challenges. And by the way, the picture you see here is by Paul Shidlaw from an American abstract expressionist painter. Well, that's clear. But I see someone who's looking at what's behind. I don't know if you saw that little joke. Now, let me see what's the time. Yes, we can do this. So please allow me a few minutes to explain the social threefold model, knowing that probably many of you are familiar with it, but probably not all of you. And so I will just briefly touch upon it, and especially students, if you don't know yet this model, if didn't pass in your lectures, look it up. Maybe you can ask about it, because there's a lot to investigate here and to learn about. But very briefly, Rudolf Steiner came with the social threefold model, in which he sees society in three relatively autonomous spheres: the cultural, the economic, and the political sphere. And education plays a crucial role within the cultural sphere. Because it directly contributes to the development of the human potential, both intellectually, emotionally, and practically. And Steiner emphasized that education should not only focus on knowledge transfers, but also on developing the free will, the moral sense, and the personal creativity of students. So you might ask, why is education now specifically situated within this cultural sphere? I gave a few reasons. So the individual development, the free thinking, the art and creativity, and community building, those are all topics that really happen in education. And I think that by understanding this model, students and schools will also understand the importance of wise, clear school policies should be there. That's the political sphere. About fair and transparent, and also about fair and transparent distribution of monetary funds. That's the economic sphere. It's all there. But the most important dominant factor in education is definitely in the cultural sphere, and we have to make that clear to students, to parents, to everybody, to politicians, if you ask me. So I propose that by introducing the original insights of the threefold model into our teacher training curricula, we can empower our students to work on solutions themselves, rather than to wait for external forces to solve the problems. And now you may ask, is it clear to burden our students with this responsibility? But I think that by approaching these issues with a sense of curiosity and playfulness, students can not only gain valuable insights into the complexities of our educational systems, but also develop a sense of agency and empowerment to acquire skills to effect positive change. By challenging the status quo and advocating for what they believe is right, because students, our future teachers, can become agents of transformation within their own school communities. And if this works in many Waldorf schools, it will be noticed by others. So what to do? I think we should introduce, or strengthen if we do already, open and honest dialogues about the pressing issues I've mentioned here, and provide our students with the necessary skills and knowledge to empower themselves. I expect that too often in our teacher training programs, we focus on the teaching practice and too little on the worldly context of that practice. So on a knowledge level, as said, make sure that all students acquire knowledge on the social threefold model and are able to position their school's policies within. That they gain a good understanding of the overall aims of education in general from different perspectives, take into account the responsibilities and burdens of parents, school management, and even politics, and to seek together for common ground. Understand that teachers need the necessary space to perform, not as a nice to have, but as a must for qualitative education. It's an empirical fact, not an idealistic wish. Understand how this can be attained by clear school policies, that if you choose to live up to, from free will and real understanding, it can create a healthy and safe autonomy because that can only exist within clear and agreed upon borders. Also, gain knowledge on sociology, on psychology, and do this in relation to communication theory. And this communication, not just on a adult child level, so as the teacher in the class, but especially also on an adult level, so that you are as strong as in communicating with parents or the school principal or other adults that come in your classroom as you are in communicating with the children. Because really what I see in many cases is that students who graduate, about 20% of them, they quit teaching within 5 years. And I don't have the exact statistics, but I know that most of them stop because they find the tension on this level, on the working together with other adults, other colleagues, with the peers, with the leadership, with the parents. That becomes so stressful to them that that's the main reason to quit. Yeah, so on a skills level, we work with students to listen deeply, to ask questions, to hold back judgments, to gain deep insights and become strong communicators and problem solvers. Again, also with adults. And in that sense, I really loved Ida's and Emma's lecture a few weeks ago that really talked about how important it is to listen to the parents, to understand the parents. Otherwise, they would have never managed to build this school that they did. All started by listening. Then we have to train extensively on receiving and giving feedback, so as to learn that feedback really are presents and not attacks. And when it is an attack, because we know that happens, when it is an attack, you should know how to deal with it and stand strong. Use the mentoring time that I'm sure all teaching programs have. Use that time to talk about the experiences of the students and the difficulties that they meet outside the classroom, and to strengthen their personal leadership. Learn students to ask for help and overcome their perfectionism, to limit themselves. And finally, but indeed not last, support the students to train their resilience by spiritual practice and making art, their own free art. I like very much Jos Schreer's lecture on the topic of the importance of the spiritual practice. In these ways, and there are likely many more examples to be found, we can work with the students on cultivating a sense of ownership and pride in one's profession, and instilling a commitment on lifelong learning and professional growth, and develop a resilience to handle the difficulties without feeling overwhelmed. We, as teacher trainers, also have a role within the schools. We can support our students by talking to our colleagues in the schools, teachers, head of school, support staff. Ask the schools to give space to our students, practically and spiritually. We have to work closely together with the schools while training the students. Make sure the students and new teachers are taken serious and are being welcomed as innovators, not as newbies that should simply integrate. Encourage the teachers into the schools to be joyful and study together, work together, take time for college meditation. Listen to the lecture by Christoph, if you didn't do so yet. A healthy, supportive and inclusive school society ensures that the hygiene factors are sufficient while giving space to the strong motivators that are always there. Students can only do so much as the school provides them space. Because every time when I visit a school where there is no teacher shortage, I'll tell you something. It strikes me how professional and joyful the teacher colleges work there, how they interact with one another, with the management and the parents, and there's no exception. All schools that have no teacher shortage have this. It's in such a school that any teacher wants to work. It's not a guarantee not to have a teacher shortage, but it's a guarantee that it will ease the problem. And in Waldorf schools, we have something special. We do have this shared vision, and we have trust in higher spirits to guide us. Can we experience and feel that together? Actually, I think that in Waldorf schools, we have no excuse to be that wonderful school where every teacher wants to work. So I've nearly come to my conclusion, but before I get there, I have some still images from a video that we made 2 years ago in the Netherlands, and that shows some of the aspects that I've been talking about. So I'll walk you through some of those images. Because what we do, let me see if this works, yes. What we have started to do 6 years ago is that we have installed something that we call studying and learning together. And since that time, our teachers have taken part of their curriculum and brought it into the schools. And they work at the schools with the students and the teachers and the principal and the support staff, and they all work together. So here are some images. Here you see our teacher, Anne, talking to the student, who in this case is a kindergarten teacher. They just have a little interaction. She's at the school 1 day a week, and so she's been observing. They have a little interaction here. Here the student talks with one of the teachers from the school, who is his mentor at the school. So this teacher is with the student the 2 days that the student is at the school. And here again, they talk about, it's mentoring, it's coaching. The student had become member of the college. He's here in the teacher's room. They just have a break. He's fully accepted as a member of the school. And by the way, our teacher as well, she's just sitting there at the table, being part of the team. And the student is he gets his space here. So in kindergarten, they probably never have seen a guitar before, but this is his art and this is his instrument. And so he has introduced his guitar and he's given all the space to work with the children as he deems right. As said, it should work on all levels. So the teacher at the school, the teacher from our institute, and the principal of the school, they take a little time every week to see how things are going, what should be done, how to support the other teachers and the other students. A real cooperation. And so here we try to really help students to become powerful teachers. You can see the video on YouTube, but it's in Dutch. The subtitles are really funny if you do the automatic translation. Yeah, so ultimately, teachers do wield a considerable power and influence in their schools, especially now with the big shortages. And those powers are far beyond their roles within the confines of their classroom. When they are aware and work together with the whole school community, they can improve the hygiene factors and experience the motivation factors that are always present within this significant profession. And our students can play an important role as agents of change or contributors to the healthy school culture. I like this sentence. I want them to be leaders of the world and not just of their classroom. And we, as teacher educators, we have a unique opportunity and responsibility to shape the future of education. and nurture the next generation of thinkers, innovators, and change makers. By providing our students with the necessary knowledge, tools, and support and guidance, we can empower them to embrace their roles as agents of change and catalysts for transformation within their communities and beyond. And let us not forget to work together with the schools and not separate from them. Now, as said, I realize that this might not solve teacher shortages overnight, but it might in the longer run, since the teaching profession has so many strong motivators, and it has all the potential to be considered an admirable position. As one upper school biology teacher recently answered to his class when they asked him, "Mister, why for God's sake did you become a teacher?" He answered, "There are many professions where you die a little every day. I don't have that sense here. And that's because of you guys." Thank you. We have time for questions.
So we have now a good time. Thank you so much for your talk. It's very interesting and lots of challenging aspects in it. So we can have a conversation now.
Yeah, I have several questions actually, but I want to ask one first question, and then I will stop and let's see that many of the other colleagues can step in and also come to their questions. So I like your approach that you asked. So there's a teacher shortage, and what is behind the scene with this painting, this abstract painting, and so on, this idea. And so you focus all the time on the teacher shortage. But see, I'm 68 years old and living in Germany. And when I was a student, there was a teacher shortage as well. I remember very well in the 60s when I went to primary school with the government tried to, I was not a Waldorf student, so I went to a public school, and the government had a hard job to find teachers, and all sorts of teachers stepped in who were disabled from the Second World War and so on. Then later on, when I studied, before I finished, we had a surplus of teachers. Too many teachers. Many teachers, they had to become like taxi drivers and somehow make a living. Then again, there was a teacher shortage, then again a surplus. Now we have a teacher shortage. So I just wonder, yeah, you didn't mention this. Maybe the teacher shortage we focus right now is just a very short problem or challenge. Maybe just for what? Maybe a decade or something, and then we might have enough teachers again. What do you think about that?
So all studies show something else. They show that the teacher shortage will be a bit less severe over the years from now till 2030, and after 2030 will increase again. So these are more based on demographic studies. What I mentioned in my talk is that the shortage on the labor market is not just with teachers, it's in many professions. So this is, of course, and this is the same as what you talk about, it has to do with the general state of the economy. So the surplus of teachers in the 70s and 80s was at a time when the economy was very weak in many Western European countries, and many people actually saw the teaching profession as a safe haven. So this, of course, has a big impact all the time, every time. For now, let's say for the next 10 years, we see that we have a big teacher shortage that will not ease away in the next 10 years, and that is really troublesome in many schools. So what I tried to explain is that if that's the situation, we have to be an attractive profession. And what makes it an attractive profession? It is by itself, it has many of the motivators, but it has also some of the strong dissatisfiers. And so when we can overcome those dissatisfiers, then I think it will become more attractive to choose this profession. Well, you can choose many, and you will have job security. That's my answer. What I can come up with now. Yeah.
There's a hand of Liz Bevan. Podium is for you, Liz.
Thank you. Really interesting, Niels. I'm in the United States. The issue is quite seriously here as well. And I have two questions that I think are connected. One, an observation, we no longer have any full-time Waldorf teacher education programs in this country. So there has been a significant shift in how teachers are being prepared and supported. There is still one in Toronto in Canada, but it's very small. I was part of a research project actually during the pandemic on teacher preparation, and no surprise, the three impediments to people going into teacher education were location, geography, and money, the cost. But I'm wondering what you think about the reality that there has also been a generational shift around the definition of work and work life, how we approach work. And that from my observation, this has actually brought quite a lot of health and different boundaries. But you mentioned these ongoing challenges with administration and governance. And I'm not sure, at least in this country, that the schools have adapted to a new generation of teachers, which is another point of friction. I just wonder what that looks like from your perspective.
I'm not sure we did, but what I see is that where, I don't know, 20, maybe even 10 years ago, most teachers would be full-time teachers. We now hardly have any full-time teachers left. So, and if I look at our students who graduate, especially the younger students, they choose to work 3 or 4 days a week max. So in that, I recognize what you're saying, and all the schools have adapted in that sense. All children are, in primary school especially, all children are familiar with the fact that they have 2 teachers and not 1. Which brings extra challenges, but also extra possibilities. Because of course, 2 people bring 2 qualities. And yeah, but it makes it hard for them to really work together on a deeper level and really work with the children, not just as a job, but as a being the teacher of the child, right? And yeah, so it's like 2 parents. Yeah, so this is one, and the other one is not really a question, I guess. It's an observation that it's difficult to have full-time teacher training. We in the Netherlands, we have full-time. We have each year about 40 students, 30 to 40 students full-time, and about the same for part-time students. But part-time students still means that they are occupied with their education for at least 2 days a week, and are let's say confronted with our teachers twice a week as well. So it's quite intense. Yeah, and it's of course it's different in many countries. The situation is rather different, and you really have to add on to what teachers have been taught in regular teaching programs to become a teacher in the first place, and then introduce them into the whole Waldorf way of thinking and looking at children and understanding anthroposophy, which is then something else, but nevertheless of utmost importance for them and for the schools. And again, something where I think you can really cooperate with the schools. I don't know the situation in all countries, but I know that sometimes the teacher training programs, colleges, institutes tend to be a little bit on their own, thinking they know what's best for the students to learn, and and not taking too much into account the worries and troubles at the schools. And I think that couldn't be. We really have to cooperate there and be aware what is necessary at the schools and take that into account in our programs. But what I find most disturbing is how many of the students maybe still are, I don't know, I don't want to offend anyone, but are so focused on the child, on the children, and are a little bit, I don't know, they're not very powerful if it comes to their position in society and towards other adults. And that often is so disturbing in their work and in their lives. And that's so the whole aim of what I'm telling is that we should work on that. And then if we get this, as I called it, powerful teachers, I think that will affect how parents look upon teachers, and in the long run, how society looks upon teachers. And it's not about status, it's about seeing, wow, this is a beautiful and important profession.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Liz, you put that question about the relation work and life, huh?
Yes.
Work-life balance. Niels, was your answer that the situation in Holland is that there are 2 teachers per class? Is that the answer?
Well, that's at least part of the answer, yes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a different connection to the profession as
Yeah.
I'm a little over 50 now. As if I talk with my teachers when I was in Waldorf schools, like more than 30 years ago, their job was their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I sometimes still meet these teachers, even young teachers. But I see that for many of our students and many of the teachers that graduate today, their job is their life, but there's more to life. There's not even
Mm-hmm.
another life necessarily, but there's more to life. So they also want real freedom in making their art, for example, making, I don't know, performances, be a painter, be whatever. So have 2-3 days a week for that, and feel themselves and feel their freedom there. So yeah, it's different, and it's a different generation, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. We go to Ida.
Yes, oops. Yes, thank you very much, Niels. Thank you for bringing the Herzberg 2 factor theory model. They're very interested in the context of what we're just discussing. Going back to the beginning of your talk, you're inviting us to introduce the threefold model in the teacher training. And that is quite a bite, especially when in our environment, we don't see it reflected. So my question is, could you just with a very thin sketch, give an example of where it's not just cerebral or reading the lecture or article, but really experiencing it, where you found that it was most successful? Is my question clear?
Yeah, it's clear. But you asked me for an example.
Concise.
So we teach the threefold model to our students already for years. And they always find it very helpful to understand the world, to understand their own position, to understand the position of education, and to see what's happening both in the schools where they are, but also in the country, how education is looked upon. And it helps them, for example, in talks with parents, but also amongst each other, to identify why education is such an important cultural factor. They need to have an understanding of this. Otherwise, they're kind of lost in, yeah, education is there, but what is it? And what is it for? What are the aims of education? And so this model helps, even if the whole society might not be organized as such. Actually, it's all recognizable. It's all there. I mean, it might not be balanced and it might not be as independent as you might wish for it, but the three spheres are always there. So yeah, it helps them. It helps them to understand their position and yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Lisa, you can
Thank you, Niels.
close.
Thank you.
People.
Thank you, Niels.
Yep.
Thank you.